Cool. Awesome. We just started. Cool. I can see some attendees coming through now. Hopefully that will fill up a bit in the next few minutes. Welcome everyone. Please do let us know where you're tuning in from in the little chat box. Any questions throughout, do just chuck them in the Q&A. So there should be a button Q&A depending if you're a laptop or on your phone. And we're wanting this to be a bit interactive so that we can answer questions as we go. So do, chuck something in the chat or the questions whenever, something comes to mind. Awesome. Okay, cool. We've got a bunch of people tuning in now. Cool. Well, welcome to our webinar on hiring devs. Today we've got Tom, and sorry, I've totally just forgot your name. Oh, are you on mute?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Now I can.
Oh, okay.
Emma.
Emma. Cool. Sorry. Brain went blank right there. And I'm Lilia from Territory 3, recently taking over full-time from Casey. So you'll be seeing a lot more of me in the upcoming webinars, along with John, of course. And yeah, ready to get this kick-started. So if you guys could do a bit of an intro, on who you are, your backgrounds, any interesting facts about yourselves, we'd love to hear.
No, you're looking at me like I should begin.
You should begin.
Great.
Yeah.
Kia ora koutou, ko Tom toko ingoa, no Inarangi o Kitipuna, kei te nohu au ki Porirua, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Hi, my name's Tom. I am the bridge builder at Enspiral Dev Academy. Bridge builder is a term that we use. Recruiter is probably a more recognized term out in the industry. But I'm responsible for building metaphorical bridges between our grads, our students becoming graduates, and then ultimately becoming people out in the tech industry. My background over the last 5 or 6 years has been in recruitment, agency recruitment here, and before that in the UK. Prior to that, I was a primary school teacher, so I know what big career switches are like, which a lot of our students go through. But I'm really passionate about seeing skills and progression in humans, and making sure that they can make the right pathways and movements in their life. Yeah, interesting facts about me. I love quizzes, and I like being a quiz person. Yeah, that's me. On to you.
Morena koutou, ko Emma Barnes toko ingoa, ko Pōneke taku kāinga. Engari I whānau mai au I te taha o te awa o Takaro. He Ngāti Pākehā, ko Ngāti Pākehā toku iwi, he tangata tiriti ahau. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Hi everybody, I'm Emma. I am the Kaihotu Haurua, or the General Manager for Tangata Tiriti at EDA. We have a dual kind of leadership structure where the GM role is shared between myself for Tangata Tiriti, or treaty partners, and we have Dougal Stott, who has the same role, who is in Auckland and does that on behalf of Tangata Whenua. So that's just a little important note about us. For me, I come out of about a decade of working in tech. My first tech job was in 2005, but I didn't really know it was a tech job. I was working at Fonterra as a project coordinator, but I was actually being a software tester at the time. And a lot of my history is in software testing. So I started, I moved back from Japan and went to Trade Me because I wanted a great place to work, and started in customer service, and then basically spent 8 years there working my way up through tech, finally as a delivery manager when I moved on from there. So I have lots of different experience with recruitment across many different types of roles. I've recruited developers, but also a bunch of testers and designers, and recruited Tom and a whole bunch of people. So I've got a generalist, I guess, experience with recruitment and tech, and a lot of people leadership work, but as well as technical work, test automation and all sorts of things. I'm a bit of a hodgepodge. I like to do lots and lots of different things in my, I have another career as well. I'm a writer and editor, and have got 2 books coming out this year, one that's already come out and one that's coming out in October. And I'm also a powerlifter, just to give you a bit of an idea that I like a wide spread of things. So I've been at EDA for about almost 18 months now, and I do a wide variety of things here as general manager. So yeah, that's me.
I can't hear you, Lily.
You're muted, I think, maybe now.
Here we go. And yeah, if you guys could just do a bit of a background on Enspiral Dev Academy, you know, what's going on there for people who might not be aware of what you're doing there.
Yeah, sure. So Enspiral Dev Academy, as it is now, I guess has been around for 7 years. It was created in response to a problem that the tech industry was having, and I believe it's still having now, and it's around it being really hard to recruit good people into the industry. There isn't enough people, and that pipeline wasn't coming through in high enough quality and at pace. So our founders went out to their network and asked the question, what makes a good developer a great developer? The answers to that question were overwhelmingly around soft skills, or as we call them, human skills, rather than the technical skills. The technical stuff can be taught, but the human stuff's a lot harder. Over the last 7 years, beginning in Wellington, and now we have an Auckland campus that's just celebrated its 5th birthday. We are a 15-week intensive bootcamp course that teaches people, often with no real previous coding experience, to become fully work-ready software developers, web developers at the end of the course. I'll give a brief course overview, I guess. The first kind of 5 weeks is at home. We call that Foundations. This really acts as like a real test to see whether our folks are committed to doing the course. We give them a lot of the foundational understanding of coding, and then they're ready to come into bootcamp, which is in person, unless you're doing our online course, which we'll talk more about, I guess, later. For the next 9 weeks, you're in very intense one-on-one, well, not one-on-one, but in-person training. So they learn everything in a tech stack from back to front, so that at the end of the 9 weeks they build working project teams and build something that is an app or something on the web that people can use and interact with and demo it at a graduation, which is tonight. Actually, we've got a lot of nervous students on the other side of these walls right now, furiously getting a demo together so they can show their friends in Whānau. And that's really it. And at the end of that, they get handed over to me, and I deliver Careers Week for a week, which is everything that they need to do to approach the market. A lot of our folks go into employed dev roles. Some of them go into graduate internships. Often folks go out and create their own things and become entrepreneurs and build amazing products. That's at the moment, we are seeing a huge demand for people to want and needs to hire more junior talent. So we are super busy, and that's probably taken up a lot of my time at the moment. Does that answer your question?
Cool, yeah. And just thought I'd mention, the course has recently become completely free, right?
Yeah, that's right. We got, as part of the government's COVID response, they've added some things to the fund called the Targeted Training and Apprenticeship Fund, which means that our course is free if you come and do it. So we're under pretty high demand with applications as well at the moment because of that. But it's made it really clear to us that cost has been a barrier. Particularly, we have a lot of lofty goals around equity, and removing the barrier of cost has sort of increased the numbers that we like to see of particularly women and Māori and Pacifica participating in our course. So that's awesome.
Cool. And now I'm just wondering, due to that high demand, do you think more spaces would open? Would you be expanding? Or is it still quite limited on who can get in?
I would say to that there's a limit to cohorts. So as I kind of alluded to before, we've got Wellington, we've got Auckland, but as of last year, in response to COVID, two of our cohorts had to pivot to fully online very quickly. We were able to do that really successfully, and actually we delivered the course as if it was here, but through Discord. And that's something that we've continued. So now we do a fully online cohort. The barriers in terms of location were completely lost. So we've got folks in Gisborne doing our course now. We've had folks over in Australia doing our course in real time. And that's a cohort that's slowly growing as we grow capacity. The really key thing for us is making sure that we've got good numbers in terms of facilitators to students. probably a key value add that we have is that, I mean, even in cohorts, maybe it's like 4 students to 1 member of staff. It's 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Which is really good. And we want to maintain that. At the point at which we start opening the doors to more people, we might lose that care and attention that we have. So really it is about that quality of service for us. Who's to say in the future that we won't have more capacity in terms of staff and we can increase it? But at the moment, we are taking that opportunity of more people to make sure that we can be more curated and careful with what our cohorts look like. And that alludes to what Emma was saying around equity and making sure that there are the people that don't look the same on our cohorts, the same as each other. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Then we'd love to roll into how can these founders choose a good dev? You know, what are the top things to look out for when hiring? What have you experienced in terms of helping people get hired into a role, and just any thoughts around, how do you choose a good dev?
Should I go? I'll go first. Yeah, take turns. So I guess that I think that this is a topic that I could talk about for hours, and is also very much on the basis of what your individual situation is. And I'd say that it really requires you to have a bit of foresight about where you're going. I think the main thing that I know out of 10 years of working in tech is the main things that I look for, and probably anybody, and it's not just a developer, is the ability to be a good team player, really, and to work in a team, to work towards a shared goal. And that's a whole range of things, from like communication skills to conflict sort of management, and you know, that classic interview question that everybody has about, tell us a time about when you've had conflict at work or whatever. I don't actually think that's a great question, but yeah, for me it's very much often technical skills, they can be hard to assess on the way in, and you might not know exactly what you want, and you might be better giving a shot to someone who maybe doesn't meet all your technical needs, but who really looks like they'll be a good collaborator with you, particularly if it's like your first developer or an early developer. Like, yeah, you definitely need someone who you can have a really great working relationship with, and hopefully you have enough self-awareness as well to know what that might be like, because that really depends. You know, are you a great direct communicator? Are you reluctant in conflict? What are your particular things? I think that's sort of what I think of as the first thing, is you kind of have to know your environment and your landscape and who you are to be able to make the next choice about who you want to bring in and work with. Tom will probably have a different answer.
Yeah, I guess no, I don't disagree with any of that, because you know a hell of a lot more than I do in that space. But from the student side and from the teaching side, we spend a heck of a lot of time on the human skills part of our course. We are providing our students with the skills to know what their stress triggers are, and to be able to communicate that with other people so that they can be a good team player. Having the confidence and the awareness to be able to front up difficult conversations with colleagues or with their employers, how to give and receive feedback in a meaningful way, so that you don't, imposter syndrome doesn't overtake and inhibit you from learning really well. We are 15 weeks. You can't teach everything from a technical perspective, but what we do teach our people is the ability to learn at pace very quickly. Phrases have been thrown around like we hack their brains before. We don't, but that gives you a bit of an insight into how we kind of hardwire learning really quickly. That's what industry tells us. They don't expect juniors to know everything from day one, but they expect them to be able to get up to speed as quickly as possible. Ultimately, that's return on investment for you as an organization. But it also sets our students up really well to grow and learn and be the best developers they can be. I was about to say that sounds really cheesy, but then I said it. Yeah. That's my answer.
Cool, awesome. And Tom, what kind of challenges do you find that founders face when they're hiring devs?
What challenges do they face? I guess it comes back to what Emma said. One founder is different to another. It depends on the size of the organization. I'd say given the general size of the organizations that are part of Territory 3 that you alluded to before, it's probably knowing their own capacity to support them well. Often startups are growing at pace, and the founder has a really clear vision about where the organization has been up to a certain point, and maybe you're getting to that point where you're starting to stabilize, and you want something that's yeah, a little bit more robust for the future. Having that transition is really hard, and when you're bringing new people into that organization that perhaps really would like just a nice stable environment where they can get one-to-one support and good feedback, and that hasn't really been part of the culture thus far. It's been a million miles an hour. Everybody mucks in, gets your hand on the tools, deals with ambiguity. That can be a really hard environment for some people. So I guess it comes back to having an honest conversation with yourself and saying, what is our capability? Who have we got in our organization that really wants to mentor people and has that time? And are we going to give them the training and the time to be able to do that effectively? Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest challenge, just capacity to support. Would you add anything to that?
I think that what I see with a lot of founders as well is maybe not expertise in hiring or in employment law, for instance. I think that a common thing that I get roped into conversations when there's already maybe 10 or so employees in the business and they want to make things better. And I think that we have this idea of HR as a kind of a negative force, and in a lot of ways it can be, but there's a lot of really great stuff to wrap around there to take care of your people. And I think that if you wrap that right into the start of anything that you're building, that you want to be able to be clear around contracts and expectations and work within the law and give, you know, good kind of working conditions. I think that in New Zealand we have actually a pretty decent environment in terms of working conditions. And one of the things that I noticed between, I guess, some of the people that we look up to in Silicon Valley versus, say, New Zealand is that over there's very few worker rights really, and it's hire at will and fire at will. Whereas in New Zealand there's a much more protected landscape for both employers and workers. And I would just really encourage people to start thinking about that really early, and to there's great government resources out there. There are people that you can get in touch with, but I think that that's a really key part of it, is making sure that you're being a responsible employer as well, which doesn't sound quite as like fun maybe as all of the stuff and thinking about hiring developers, but it's really important, and it's very easy to forget it until it's too late and you've built a culture where you can't actually bring it in, or it's too hard. That's sort of more what I would add on that.
Cool. You must be looking at the question that's just popped up. Q&A from Edward Scott.
Yeah. How to select tech stacks/code languages. I'm a non-technical founder, either for companies re-platforming their MVP product or ventures starting out from scratch.
I mean, I'd say that's probably a slightly outside both of our technical expertise. I think that if you're a non-technical founder, you definitely need to find a really great technical expert that you trust and can rely on, I guess, is sort of more what I would think. What I know of tech stacks is that, in my experience over time, that they can all work to your purpose, and that they all have their drawbacks. And so really finding someone who can understand you and that you can talk to and feel safe with and trust, I guess. And that's probably the biggest thing. Very hard to assess technical skills as a non-technical founder. But I don't know if you have friends or networks to draw on. Like, I have a bunch of people in a network that I would ask for help if that was something that I was doing. But I think that I would also be pretty nervous about going for real cutting edge technology unless you had a really big reason to use it. Just because there's some tried and true stuff out there that does sort of work. And tech stack also just really depends on what you're doing with it, would be my answer as the semi-technical person in the room. For that one. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. And now I did see another question pop up in our chat there. Let me see. Aiden is asking if you could give a few top tips for getting started with a dev, both local and also abroad, like Upwork.
I don't actually know what Upwork is. Is that like a
I believe it's a platform for hiring people.
Hiring contract devs, is it?
Yeah.
Kind of? Yeah, right. Okay. Top tips for getting started. I guess knowing so I think that's all the pre-work before you engage with someone, of knowing what you're trying to do, being able to really engage with that, and knowing kind of also what you need. I don't know how many of you are able to assess that, but early on, I think it's better to probably hire one really quality permanent employee versus lots of contractors. With contractors, like one of the things I'm always thinking about is knowledge loss. And that seems like a pretty big risk to me if you're early on in a sort of founding journey of having multiple contractors and maybe they leave and move on. Whereas if you've got like a small team of dedicated people, it's probably a bit easier to build and document something that is a bit more reliable. Obviously, that's probably comes at a bigger cost call. Maybe it is really a lot cheaper to maybe get a contractor for a short time, and I understand all of that. But even working with fixed term contracts can also give you a lot of flexibility in terms of if things turn out negatively for you, or you've lost a bunch of money or whatever, you can still work with your staff as you need to. But yeah, I think it's really about, and also like being good at, I don't know how you've thought about interviewing or the skills of that, or how to make people feel welcome or connected. I've sort of, I guess, spent the last 10 years learning how to interview people and to get what I sort of want to know out of them. And that itself is a skill set. And I guess also whether you're prepared to pay for experts to do it for you. There are heaps of especially in Wellington where we are, some really good recruitment firms that can help you get more of what you want. So that would also be a thing that I would consider if you don't know what you're doing. Maybe the learning curve to level up is way too expensive in terms of your time, and you'd prefer to just put some money into it. There's those sort of things to consider as well.
Cool.
That question also, was that more in the recruitment space, or was that like once they've onboarded, that could have gone both ways for me?
Yeah, that could have gone both ways.
Anyway.
I would have assumed recruiting.
Okay.
And then another question coming up. If you're a non-technical founder, are there short or nighttime courses that you run? I'm assuming you don't.
Unfortunately, no. We're sadly a full-time, it's only 16 weeks, so it's not like too long. Boot camp. We've actually had some non-technical founders come through it recently, so yeah.
Yeah, there seems to be a bit of a growing market for us, potentially. Coming back to the previous question quickly, what I'd add to that as well is, whilst you get knowledge loss as well with contractors, you also potentially lose what could be your organizational culture as well. You get someone on a either longer fixed term or a more permanent contract, they feel more part of the woodwork, as it were, and can start to really emulate and build a stronger culture for you, which will make hiring for the types of personalities and skills that you want in future much easier, and you will get better at it over time. Contracting tends to happen really at pace, and I've seen the worst of contract hiring in my agency recruitment time, particularly in Wellington, particularly into the government market. And a lot of it can be very lucrative for recruiters, but actually over time it's a really costly process, because it's just like, I'll meet them for coffee and I'll hire them, and recruiter sitting there rubbing their hands. But actually in terms of the long-term gain that you get from a culture and from a skills perspective is net negative. That would be what I'd add to that.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's a good point to also be aware of the recruiters, that they're not just mass recruiting for their cut.
Yeah. I mean, there are great recruiters out there, but generally, if you look at it from a demand supply cold perspective, it can be quite uneven.
Cool. We've got a question here from Max. If you were to split the grads into two types, those that walk into a job and those that struggle, what would be the main characteristics of both?
Those that walk into a job and those that struggle. It's a really hard one to answer, because there's two parts to this question for me. There's traditionally people that succeed versus those that struggle, based on potentially the individual skills, but also there's a question about the landscape and what the tech environment perhaps doesn't do so well. At EDA, one of our big challenges that we want to see changing is more diverse backgrounds in the tech industry, people that don't look the same and think differently in the industry. So I want to make a comment on that, because there are things outside of control. But if we imagine it's a world where all things are equal, which seems a stretch, but the things that the differences between grads that would walk into a job versus those that would struggle, I think it ultimately comes down to being able to know your own strengths and your own weaknesses. Weaknesses is a tough word.
Growth areas.
Growth areas. There we go. And knowing where you still have learning to do. The grads that come out and say that are able to tell a really good story about how they've grown in one area are the ones that traditionally do really well, particularly when it comes to interview, I guess. So we often get them to reflect back during the course. Where's an area of your learning that you've had the greatest growth in? And often that's not even potentially a technical thing. That's more of our human skills thing. When I came onto the course, I actually found that I was used to working on my own quite a lot in my previous role. And actually what I've learned is that in a team environment, I've got better at saying what my needs are. And I know how to communicate in order to get a task completed as part of the team. I've shown that through DA, or I've shown that through my previous career. Folks that can tell that story and really believe it and know where they can add value, as soon as they've got confidence in that, it tends to come through and translate to landing roles. That's something that stands out for me. And what would you say?
Yeah, I think I would just tautoko Tom's point around, I guess, systemic advantage. Like there is still real systemic advantage for some people. And I think even Tom's second point about good storytelling, being able to perform and being a bit extroverted, like those are qualities that do really well in interviews. And I think that we still haven't really answered how people who are maybe introverted or who maybe have autism or other mental health challenges, how we can make interviews more welcoming and easier for them to actually talk about their true selves, so that we can get a better picture. So there's that kind of thing to think about. I think also another thing is it's really hard to get knocked back, and a lot of our students, the ones that I see that make it in the end are the ones who have persistence. And sometimes that's about a real stubborn belief that they want to get into the industry. Sometimes it's just that they've picked this change and they're committed. The others of them, I think, maybe drop out once they get rejected a lot, because having a lot of rejection is really hard, especially repeated rejection. And our students put so much effort into every job interview and every job application. And yeah, so I think persistence is a really important character trait. Yeah.
Cool. You touched on it just before. Actually, one of our topics to talk about was hiring with diversity. What are your thoughts around that?
A lot. It's been a passion area of mine, and it's been something that I've been working on for probably 10 years. And so I have ideas, but I wouldn't say even within that I'm anywhere near an expert. I guess the thing is really thinking about what you're creating, the environment that you're creating in an interview, and even with a job ad. I think that one of the things that you need to think about is, who am I rejecting just with my wording? You know, there's tools out there that will help you identify things like, in tech, there's been a classic push away from things like advertising pool tables and beer and pizza and that type of thing, because we know that doesn't tend to pull in everybody that we might want to. But there are also a bunch of other things that you can say that sort of bring people in. In EDA ads, we talk about our commitment to Tiriti, and we talk about bringing family members along, or we talk about being a child-friendly workplace. Like, we often have kids in meetings, and allowing children to be in the workplace means that all parents are able to participate more. So yeah, I could spend a very long time talking about that, but we're actually, should I do a little sales pitch?
Sure.
We're actually going to be doing an inclusive recruitment course coming up in August, and we'll be looking to repeat that going forward. So if it's something that you're really interested in and want some help with, it's probably, maybe if you've had a little bit of experience already, it's probably not maybe a good beginner thing, but feel free to get in touch with us and have a chat about it, and we can tell you more about that if you're interested. But yeah, it's a big topic. There's heaps online.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, when you're kind of like an expert in a field, sometimes it's really hard to like narrow it down to go, what are some top tips? But yeah, just thinking differently, I think, about what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think it is about, at the entry level, I guess it's about having that awareness, starting from the end and working backwards. What do we actually want the outcome to be? or what would we like the outcome to be in an ideal world, and going back through the process from offer stage, and I'm really looking at it and going through with a fine-tooth comb and going, okay, how could I potentially be filtering out the people that I want at this stage, and working back from there. That's a good first point. Feedback is a great place to start from there. Looking back at previous recruitment processes that you've had and going, okay, is there anyone that we rejected before that we could speak to and ask how they felt? What was our recruitment process like? How did they feel going through it? That's a really good place to start with real data.
Cool. And Emma, is it all right if I just put your email in the chat box here? I'm sure we've got quite a few people who would be interested in that course.
Yeah, it's emma@devacademy.co.nz.
Oh, Emma.barnes at Dev Academy?
Either work. They both work.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah.
Cool. So people should just send you an email that they're interested in, and then you'll get back with more info.
Totally.
Awesome. That sounds really cool, actually. We'll be keen to learn more about that when it comes around. Cool. So next question up is from Jesse. He asks, how can I make my startup more appealing in order to hire the first good dev? So what can the startup do?
The question comes back to what's more appealing. Who are you trying to appeal to? Why are you trying to appeal to them? And if you can answer those questions, then you probably start to give yourself the answer.
Yeah. Like, who are you, Jesse, and what are you trying to build? I guess I think that at EDA, our founders had quite a lot of clear ideas about what they were trying to do that always linked back to equity as well. And so that is something that really attracts people to us, and it attracts people that we want to attract. And so I guess it's kind of about thinking about that. But in terms of like baseline stuff, I think that people appreciate certainty, good working conditions. You know, not everybody wants all the flashy stuff like beer on Fridays or, as I've said before, a pool table. But I think that in my experience of hiring, people really appreciate flexible working, being able to work remotely when they need to, or work from different locations, or there's so much that you can do that is actually good for everybody. Like, I think that often in equity conversations, it can get a bit fraught because people feel like it's a special advantage for women or a special advantage for Māori and Pacifica, but actually a lot of the things that we've put in place to support those people are really great for everybody. You know, as I talked about before with having children in the workplace, improving the lives of parents improves the lives of children, improves the lives of everybody. And parents aren't just women. And so a lot of dads, in my experience, or a lot of parents who aren't dads, but who aren't the primary carer, want to be involved in their children's lives more, and flexible working allows that. So I guess I would just think about what are the things that you can afford to be really flexible on. Maybe you can't pay big salaries, but maybe you can offer really flexible working, or part-time, or, you know, there's quite a lot of levers to pull and shift that aren't just about, I guess, money or those kind of perks that we think of, like coffee machines in the office and that type of thing.
Although we do have exceptional coffee in the office.
We do have good coffee in the office, but it's not, I don't know.
That's not the thing that attracts.
It's not the thing that attracts people.
I can speak from personal experiences that you know, going from agency recruitment, I left because I wanted something with a bit more of a social focus. And when you start searching for things that have a social focus, it's actually really hard to decipher between organizations that mean it or just put it on the values on their website. I came across the role at EDA because it was posted on Do Good Jobs, which is I guess a job board for roles with a social focus. Again, I'm sure it's not perfect, but it's a good indicator. But it was the job ad from EDA that talked about all these other things like, you know, bring your whole self to work, bring your whānau, you know, work retreats, and all of the things that just pointed towards this is a human-centered approach. The vision and the purpose of EDA as an organization was really clear. So that was what made the decision for me to apply. I actually applied for a role that I didn't get, that was way out of my actual scope of expertise, or certainly partly. But again, taking that human-centered approach, it was Emma, they contacted me and said, hey, not right for this role, but we are looking to recruit for a recruiter type role in the near future. So would you come back in for that? So that ability to be flexible and think, okay, this person's not right this time, but could I use them elsewhere? and keeping an open mind and being flexible is really key. And as startup founders, you're arguably able to be potentially more flexible in that regard than perhaps a larger organization.
Totally.
Cool. Yeah. So definitely it's more about taking that like human approach, remembering that these people that you're hiring are just human beings and have, you know, needs and wants just like everyone, and how can you nurture that and make it an appealing place to work. Cool. Next question from Duncan. What are the best methods to make students productive in the workplace when they come out of the 15 weeks?
This might be controversial, but I think that the students will try to be productive immediately. But I think that taking the onus off them being productive and them being in a learning environment is really the best thing to do. In my experience, juniors in their first sort of 1 to 2 years of work, they will be productive and they will do work, don't get me wrong. But it's just that I think that if you have that view that they're trying to produce something rather than they're trying to actually improve their skills, I think over that time, that first 1 to 2 years, ideally, if you have the ability to tolerate that, and honestly, in a startup, maybe a junior is not right for you in terms of what you need to do. It might be perfect for you. Who knows? I don't know your particular circumstances, but you kind of got to think of investing in juniors. That's really what's going on there. And I think that productivity is slightly the wrong lens for that. It sort of doesn't allow you to view them as a human and to help them with their learning needs as well. Because often learning is slow and wonky, or it does cost a bit and take a bit of effort. But the more we invest in our juniors, the bigger pool we get. Eventually, the more seniors we get and the better it is for all of us. So I really take the view that investing in juniors is a community responsibility. And the moment that you as a business can afford to, we should all be doing it.
Cool. I do love that part about investing in them, because I'm aware that currently, you know, with the dev shortage, a lot of startups have been nabbing each other's devs. So the key thing is how can you make them want to stay with you and not just jump over to, you know, something that offers a bit of a higher pay rise, because there is a bit of that happening recently, which is not the best thing, but at least you guys are here training up more people to help fill those gaps.
Hopefully.
Okay, a question from Max. Which part of the recruitment process do your grads struggle with the most?
Yeah, great question. The hardest part of the job search is getting the first interview, I would say. So I guess the part that they struggle with, and perhaps not through much fault of their own, is the initial application. So we spend a lot of time during Careers Week talking about how to really decipher what an organisation is looking for, and deciphering if that's something that you really want, and really knowing the reasons why you want to apply before you apply. When you're desperate for a role off the back of this course, it can be really tempting to just fire applications out 30 a week. So we really try and pare that back and say, okay, one really carefully curated application per week is probably a more reasonable kind of level. And before you do that, my recommendation is always that they try and speak to a human first. So, you know, use LinkedIn, try and find out who's the hiring manager, or is there a dev that's relatively new to that organization that you could contact and say, hey, can I buy you a coffee, or, you know, talk about what it's like to work at company XYZ. And gathering those facts ahead of an application is really key. Folks that manage to do that, or even pick up the phone and speak to the office number of the company, that blows their minds. But just try and speak to someone about the role. Those that do that and start to build those relationships ahead of application are invariably more successful. Also, networking is a huge an indicator for success. Unfortunately, again, that is susceptible to the extrovert bias. Those that are more comfortable in a networking environment over drinks or whatever that may well be, and are confident enough to walk up to the CTO of a company and introduce themselves, are probably going to be more successful. And that can be pretty hard for folks that's not their comfort zone. But we do talk about ways to network as an introvert, and ways around that. But yeah, I'd say that the struggling part is making that connection pre-application, and getting that successful first interview. Once they've had the interview, they can get real feedback, hopefully. And I'd certainly expect that all of you, if you are interviewing people, you're giving full, useful feedback. We call it actionable, specific and kind, ask feedback, that they can use for their next application. But then from there, they can learn quite quickly and improve.
Cool. Just a reminder, any questions, do chuck them through in the Q&A box. So if there's anything on your mind, anything that you want to ask while we've got these guys here. In the meantime, have you had any success stories? You know, someone that's been hired and gone on to do amazing big things. Would love to hear anything like that.
Yeah, sure. We often roll out Kendall Fluted.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, Kendall started an organisation called Banker, BANQUER, QUER.
I can't remember how it's spelled yet.
But it's I guess a learning platform to teach financial literacy to children across schools, and it's been picked up and heaps of investment, and I don't know how the right words to say this, but it's big.
It's big. Yeah. I think one of our grads also just got an award with the ITP as the Young Internet Professional of the Year. Was that right? Just this week sometimes. I'd say that we have success stories. Success stories for me are also people who go out and get the type of life that they want. So when I was out in industry, I started hiring EDA grads, which is how I got back here, because I found them to be really great hires. And one of the people that I hired is a ex-PE teacher who wanted to transition into tech to get a remote working lifestyle so that they could surf as much as they wanted. And this person is currently living that. So I think that to me, that's also a success story, you know, people building the lives that they want, doing the work that they want. We have a bunch of people who have gone back to their communities. Some of those are Indigenous communities and worked on technology, on language revitalization and a whole bunch of things like that. So there's that kind of success as well. I guess the more kind of the stuff that we don't necessarily think about, that's not like an award or an amazing startup. What else can I think of?
Yeah, I get the I guess enviable side of my job is that I'm in contact with our grads daily, and I'm one of the first people that they contact when they get a job. I'm also one of the first people I contact when they get knocked back from a job interview. But I see these as little success stories all the time, and I feel a real buzz every time someone contacts me and says, "Oh, I got the job," and they're always, you know, gushing with thanks for different people in the course and the staff and their cohorts. So that's a big success for me. I've only been in the role since last year, so you know, I'm yet to see kind of that longer term picture other than what's been said. But yeah, we have successes all the time.
Cool. I see a question coming through in our chat box from Wolf. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. What systems or procedures do you have to ensure the curriculum is kept up to date with industry needs, and how can people give feedback on that?
So we do a lot of industry engagement. Not all of it is about curriculum, but we are talking regularly with people who receive our grads, or receive, that sounds terrible, who hire our grads. And so we have lots and lots of feedback loops that way. In terms of in-house and the curriculum, we have a bunch of industry professionals who work on that. And we've actually changed our curriculum a few times from language. We used to do Ruby, and now we're sort of more JavaScript based. And so we do definitely listen to industry and rework the curriculum. We also do small changes all the time. So there's there's multiple layers to that. There's the small incremental kind of, technical debt kind of stuff that we do. And then if we need to do big changes because industry is telling us students are not fit for purpose, then we will look at that. But at the moment, with what we're training them, the feedback I think that we get is that it works enough that maybe what people would like is actually like a little short course at the end on C# or on, what's the other one that comes up a lot? Totally, Shopify actually is one that comes up a bit. So yeah, we have a few things. If you want to give us feedback, I'd probably encourage you to get in touch with Tom and become one of our industry stakeholders, and we can catch up with you regularly and have a chat about that kind of thing. We're always interested in connecting with people in different places and broadening our community. So that's sort of, I guess, where it stands.
Yeah, And my email is tom.king@devacademy.co.nz, but I presume Tom at works as well. I don't really know, but we got that set up. Maybe you don't take that as granted. But yeah, I would say, like recently, for example, the teaching staff were pondering on the way that they teach and curious about how industry uses CSS now. So they asked me to, they put together a little Google Forms, and we sent it out as part of some comms to our tech leaders community ahead of one of the events that we're running next month. So those little kind of outreach activities, seeking feedback from the people that we know and trust the most is another way that we look for that. Yeah.
Cool. We've got a question here from Rob. Where would you recommend finding experienced Kiwi developers online or in person, i.e. where do the experienced ones go when looking for a job? You know, is it Seek or is it LinkedIn or how, yeah, where would you find them?
Complex.
That's very complex.
Yeah, I think that I've mostly worked in dev organizations that have a really good and really well-known brand already. So we would get a lot of people coming to us organically, plus then we would, well, at TradeMe we advertised on TradeMe, we didn't advertise on Seek, but at other places I've worked, we advertised on Seek and had our own recruitment portal. So I think that it sort of depends on how well known you are. I think Seek is probably out competing TradeMe jobs. But if you think about the cost of ads in terms of the cost of recruitment, from my opinion, when you're starting out, is you just want as much connection as possible. So I'd be encouraging you to list on TradeMe and on Seek and putting it on LinkedIn and trying to connect through your networks. There's a really large women and non-binary people in tech Slack that I often do a lot of promotion through to find developers or connect with people through there. So it's worth thinking about sort of existing underground things as well. I think if you do have a social focus, Do Good Jobs is a really great place to put your ads. That definitely has a decent amount of traffic. But yeah, if you're just starting out and you don't have a recognized recruitment brand, I'm a real big fan of the shotgun approach, just everywhere you can.
Yeah, and I think you know, finding experienced people is hard enough at the best of times, and at the moment everybody's struggling.
Yeah.
If you are if you're a senior dev out there in industry, you're probably not going anywhere to look for a new job. Like you're probably being paid really well,
or getting approached.
Yeah. And you have to be shoulder tapped, which takes time and it takes a curated approach. And going back to what we talked about earlier, you really need to know about what your value proposition is. Like what's your social mission, or what's your corporate mission, or whatever that may well be, because you'll need to communicate it really well to that person for them to make the decision to meet you for a coffee, or whatever your process is. Because if you approach them for something and you can't, if you can't articulate that in a way that's true and meaningful, then you probably won't be successful in that approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. Max has just put that through in the chat as well, that the experienced developers aren't the ones looking for jobs. So putting your ad on Seek or TradeMe might not be getting those the highly experienced ones that you are looking for. In which case, you know, it might come down to searching people up on LinkedIn, just putting the feelers out there and, you know, seeing who is looking to make a change from perhaps the current role that they're in. Yeah, definitely that would be a bit more of a difficult thing than just chucking up an ad for a job.
Yeah, I think looking for seniors has always been quite hard in my experience, but I would say that right now it's very difficult, extremely challenging.
Maybe looking internally, if you've got people, and rather than seeing them as not ready, see them as, okay, what steps can we take to make them a senior in the next 6 to 12 months? Might be cheaper, but also be like the right thing to do for the ecosystem. We're not promoting people internally and creating that pipeline for the long term, then this problem's only going to get worse. Rather than where are the seniors and looking externally for that, where do they come from?
To grow. Yeah.
Good point. And what are your thoughts on hiring people overseas? Say you can't find the experienced developer that you're looking for here in New Zealand. Have you had much experience in the realm of looking at overseas for that talent?
So I've had experience in terms of, I worked at PowerShop for a while, and PowerShop really struggled to find Ruby devs in Wellington, which was sort of the 2016, 2017 time. And at that time, we would bring in a lot of people from overseas, specifically on the various talent shortage visas to come in and do Ruby work for us. We found that was actually kind of a little bit of a fake shortage, if that makes sense, because that was much about how we were looking for people. And so we had a very narrow and specific recruitment lens that trimmed out a lot of people. So I actually, in the end, we sort of worked on it and ended up flipping it totally and found we were fine, because we also invested heavily in training people. We had a dev train that was anywhere from 3 weeks if you were maybe a real senior to 3 months if you were quite junior, that taught you how we did Ruby in-house. So we put a lot of effort into helping people and to try and grow the Ruby development population. And that turned out honestly a cheaper strategy for us long-term compared to all the costs of bringing in people from overseas. It's really hard interviewing people overseas or even just online if you're not co-located. I think there are also lots of agencies that you can connect with to sort of connect in with contract devs overseas. I don't have heaps of experience with that, but often I think about, I guess I have a real big focus on labour rights, and often the reason those devs are so cheap is because they're paid very badly and they don't have good working conditions. So I think that I would think about your ethical approach to that. But at the moment, with the borders closed, there's not really very much that you can do around trying to hire people on those particular visas. So I think it flips back to growing.
Yeah, and also there's a conversation there around what are your remote working capabilities. So if you're going to hire someone from overseas that can't be here, then you better be sure that you're still able to support them and onboard them in a way that's meaningful remotely. If you've never done it before, then spending some real time and looking at those processes and speaking to people in your network that have done it before is a really good approach. I was recruited overseas for my previous role when I first came to New Zealand, and certainly the first time that I've ever been offered a job while I was still in a different country. Things that stood out about the process were regular communication at weird hours because of the time difference, and just them going above and beyond to kind of talk about the things that aren't work related. Do you need any help with different areas in which you could live, or here's all the infrastructure that we're going to give you. Just making sure all of the things that you're unsure of are a little bit more stable ahead of that move. But yeah, I'm sure that's even tougher when you're doing it remotely. But yeah.
Cool. And a big question, where do you see the future of Enspiral Dev Academy? What's on the plans there?
What can we say?
I think that for me, I guess one of the things that I have learned from, I guess, Mātauranga Māori, or Māori knowledge, is this concept of having, instead of like the classic 3 to 5 year vision in business, having a 100-year vision. So for me, I really want us to keep doing the great work that we do around equity and to build upon that and to influence in different ways and really make New Zealand tech even more, I guess, thriving and amazing than it already is. There's already some cool stuff going on out there, but there's room for more. And we're so well placed to do so much cool stuff here. And I just feel like we're a big contributor to that. And I look forward to more of particularly our regional communities having access to some of the great tech stuff that's in Wellington, and being able to have people live the lifestyles that they want, with their families, and do work that excites them. So that's kind of my 100-year vision, maybe.
Yeah, I think that access to tech as a career is probably central. It's well paid, it's accessible, you can do it remotely. The more people that can get themselves into that what is a very stable and growing career route, if we can be a small part of that, or a big part of that, then that would be fantastic. For me, in the short to medium term, I think we're already doing great work in this space, but having our cohorts reflect population parity or better in terms of their makeup would be. I know that's something that we're doing huge amounts of work on there, that we're getting heaps of people through the door, but just more of that for the future would be great.
That's definitely not my deadlifting PB. Mine's a much more respectable 170, which I still think is pretty decent.
Cool. We've got 5 more minutes if anyone does have any burning questions that you want to, chuck in the chat or the Q&A before we head off. Otherwise, anything else on your mind? What else is going on? Any other tips? I guess the core of what a lot of people here are wanting to know more, about, hiring devs. So any, tips that we might not have covered that you've got in the back of your minds there?
I'd probably just repeat, feedback is the most important thing from both sides of the process for me. If you want to hire better or whatever better looks like for you, then listening to what you've done potentially not so well in the past is the first step to getting off on the right foot. So have a look back through what you've done before, really be open-minded and assess what's gone well, speak to people, and go again, because that's what I'm telling the students on this side. If you get knocked back, have you got feedback? Oh no, I haven't really asked them. Okay, we'll ask them and find that, because that's the only way that you'll learn and improve. I'm more than willing to have conversations like this on the regular, on a one-to-one basis. So yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm Wellington based most of the time, but I do flit around to different locations. So if you're elsewhere, I'm more than happy to catch up.
And I guess I'd add to that sometimes when you're in a leadership or a founding position, it can be hard to get feedback, because people view you as having quite a lot of power, which is true, you do. And that makes a bunch of people reluctant to tell you, especially in a New Zealand context, how they really feel. So I think that feedback needs to go alongside self-knowledge and working on yourself and knowing about how you communicate, how you think about conflict, what your biases might be, all of that kind of stuff, and really getting to know yourself. I think that's the true power of leadership for the future is self-knowledge and learning how to be a better human alongside all the humans you want to be better humans as well. So yeah, that's probably the only thing from me.
Cool. Well, no other questions have come through. So awesome. Wow. Thanks so much, you guys, for coming on. Just thought I'd jump in with a couple of notes of the key takeaways that I've noticed. The first thing that caught my eye was startups need to nurture the devs and have someone within your startup to actually be dedicated to, helping them out where is needed, being a bit of the HR role, but, not quite typical HR. I thought that was pretty standout. It's more important to have a small team with full-time employees versus having a ton of contractors, which will come and go, and you just can't retain the same value there. And having, the value of having a real team and people that support your startup and what you're doing. What else have I got here? Give devs feedback if you're not hiring them, so that they can keep learning and improving. And also to contact Emma if you're interested in the new course coming up on hiring on diversity. Is that what you called it?
Called Inclusive Recruitment.
Inclusive Recruitment, okay.
Actually, Gina, one of our team, has put a little link in the chat. So there's a little link to more information there as well if you'd like to get to it. So
cool. No, that's perfect. Yeah, thanks. I'll see if I can chuck that into when we upload this on YouTube as well in the next few hours. So if anyone has missed this webinar, they can rewatch. If you know anyone, send it their way in a couple of hours once that's uploaded. We'll chuck it up on our socials as well. But otherwise, thank you so much to Emma and Tom from Enspiral Academy for jumping onto our webinar today. And yeah, do get in touch with them if you've got any more questions. But otherwise, thanks so much, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Catch you later.